This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Kevin Tucker and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic!
What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is October 14th, 2024. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Kevin Tucker. Kevin, how are you?
I'm good, Jonathan. You know, last time we recorded, you were in the middle of Hurricane Milton, as were many of our viewers and listeners. And so hopefully the hurricane didn't treat you too poorly. Hopefully everybody's doing okay. Everybody's safe. Everybody's healthy. But yeah, that was, I think, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, that was a bullet dodge, because that was pretty scary going into it. And so it looks like most of Central Florida, not everybody, obviously, most of Central Florida was able to avoid what could have been really, really disastrous.
Yeah, as we were recording, it was starting to get a little bit scary. And then whenever we have storms like that sort of overnight, I try to stay up like as late as I can just to kind of make sure everything is, cool in the house before, I end up going to bed. But that storm was really odd, at least in terms of the storms that I've experienced, where the back half was actually stronger than the first half. So as the night went on, it was getting worse and worse. And we actually didn't lose power that night. We lost internet around like 12:30 Thursday morning, and then, was fine, had power, AC, all of that great stuff all throughout the night. And then we didn't have internet until about 1 o'clock, like quarter after 1 on Thursday. Internet comes back up. I'm like, okay, I'm going to, start responding to some work emails, that kind of cool stuff. And then 1:30, the power went out. So we were without power for a little bit, but I know there are people that either just got power back yesterday or are still without power. And obviously further south of us, there are people that were affected way more than that. One of my buddies lives in an apartment complex, like high rise in Tampa, and said they could literally feel their apartment building swaying during that storm. And I mean, there was a crane that fell in St. Petersburg. Like, obviously there was tons of damage from that, but yeah.
And the tornadoes, like southeast Florida, which was crazy.
I saw a video of a big construction dumpster that got thrown up into the air and landed on a house. Like
a roof.
Like, tornadoes are no joke. But yeah, hopefully, everybody, listening here to the show and watching on YouTube, we're fine. But yeah, it definitely felt like that was another sort of bullet that we dodged, and just hoping to get through the next few weeks here, the rest of hurricane season, without another scare, because the last couple of weeks have definitely taken a few hours at least off of my life. So, but yeah, very thankful that didn't have anything too crazy happen. As we're recording this, the Naismith Hall of Fame and basketball induction ceremony is getting ready to tip off, where Vince Carter, Orlando Magic alum and Central Florida native, is going to be officially inducted into the Hall of Fame. So that's pretty exciting, Kev.
Yeah, obviously well-deserved. They had this little segment on social media. Another inductee in this class is Chauncey Billups, who has the nickname Mr. Big Shot. And they were going back and forth of like, who has the best nickname between the two, Mr. Big Shot or Vinsanity, Vince Carter. Now, it made me think, like, Vince Carter has some of the coolest nicknames, I think, in the history of basketball. When you talk about Vinsanity, which is what a name. But then you also, there was at one point people were calling him half man, half amazing. That was another thing. But like Vinsanity, and by the way, we have a lot of younger viewers and listeners. Like, just in honor of, again, a Central Florida native and a former Orlando Magic player tonight, go watch some like prime Vince Carter highlights. Not when he was with the Magic. He had some nice moments, but go back to his days in Toronto, his days in New Jersey, and just watch this guy. This guy changed.
New Jersey actually used to have a basketball team, kids.
That's right. They were called the New Jersey Nets. But go back and watch him. The guy changed the game. The guy changed the dunk contest. Did a lot of cool things. So anyway, yeah, obviously well-deserved for Vince. Excited to get to watch that ceremony here in just a little bit.
Some more Magic news. So the Magic announced that they signed Robert Baker II, center, played, for the Magic previously and played for the, Osceola and Lakeland Magic. And they've waived guard Javonte Smart. I don't really think this has a lot to do with Wendell. I think at this point in the preseason, you're just trying to get another look at, another guy who probably is going to still be in the Magic system, in the Magic organization. And then the Magic stayed in, where were they? New Orleans.
San Antonio.
Oh, they stayed in San Antonio after leaving New Orleans. Because of the storm, they didn't come back. They were back in Orlando yesterday practicing. And Jamal Mosley was asked about Wendell Carter Jr. about the left ankle sprain. And Mosley said he's doing okay, but he did not practice on Saturday. It's pretty much day to day at this point. Paolo Banchero, after the first game, basically told the media that he told Wendell Carter, just take the rest of the preseason off. So if Paolo Banchero is saying that, my guess is we're probably not going to see Wendell for the rest of the preseason, and I'm not really worried about that.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on the last episode. I would prefer it, honestly, just play it safe, give Wendell these last couple weeks off, or week and a half off, I guess it is. When did we start? 23rd? Yeah, week and a half. Wow, that's crazy.
We got 9
We're
days.
right around the corner. I didn't even realize that, so I said that out loud. That's amazing. Anyway, yeah, give him the rest of the preseason off. He's not going to have to face Joel Embiid on Friday. By the way, the Sixers announced that Embiid's out for the rest of the preseason.
Dodging Jet Howard.
He's scared. He's scared of Jet Howard. Now, the other thing I wanted to say, Jonathan, as you were talking about the team staying in San Antonio during the storm, I hope that. Well, I know there were some opportunities for this. They asked Tristan da Silva after that practice on Saturday. He mentioned he got to have dinner with Franz and Mo. It made me think maybe silver lining of this is these guys got to have some kind of hangout time off the court, in San Antonio. Maybe not the best place to hang out if you ask Charles Barkley, but for a lot of other people, there's some nice parts of San Antonio, some beautiful places, some nice food. So hopefully it got me thinking, hopefully the guys had some time to just hang out, maybe grow a little closer. Maybe some of the new, new guys like Tristan da Silva, KCP, maybe got some extra hangout time with their new teammates. So hopefully maybe there's a little silver line to the guys having to hang out in San Antonio for an extra little bit.
And now that we're talking about the season starting in 9 days, we have some official watch party news for the first watch party of the year. We are partnering with Michelob Ultra and the Orlando Magic to help put on the first Magic watch party of the year. This one is going to be at the Social House, which is located at 435 North Alafaya Trail in Orlando. Kevin, this is a bit of a tradition where Luke and I used to go through the menu for these venues that we're having the watch parties at. And I have to say, man, there's some stuff on this menu. Underneath their bites is the double smash burger sliders, double all beef patties, American cheese, their Soho burger sauce, lettuce, pickle served with kettle chips. And then they also have street corn chicken nachos, corn chips, cotija cheese, diced chicken, street corn, diced tomatoes, red onions, jalapenos, crema, and cilantro. They also have double baked chicken wings, bone-in baked wings, and choose either buffalo, Korean barbecue, gold barbecue, Thai chili, guava barbecue, which sounds great, garlic parm, blackened, which is a dry rub, and then lemon pepper, which is a dry rub. And then they also have some ridiculous sounding pizzas. They have a hot honey pepperoni.
That's what I was looking at.
Fresh red tomato sauce, sliced pepperonis, pickled cherry peppers, sign me up, mozzarella, and a hot honey drizzle. Are you joking?
You see this other pizza, Korean barbecue chicken and Gouda? What a combo.
Yeah,
Korean barbecue sauce, diced baked chicken, red onion, mozzarella, fresh Gouda, and scallions. Holy smokes.
Yeah. And I will say some of the cocktails do sound pretty good as well. They have a Tito's spiked lemonade. I'm a big sucker for, strawberry or watermelon lemonade. They have both versions of that. And they have a cucumber ginger mint fizz, which is Kettle One cucumber mint vodka, simple syrup, ginger beer, fresh lime, and fresh mint. That sounds right up my alley. So looking forward to being at the Social House. Again, that is going to be next Wednesday. Tip-off against the Miami Heat is at 7:30. So this party is going to get started around 7 o'clock. But very much looking forward to being at the Social House. Again, that is located at 435 North Alafaya Trail in Orlando, Florida. Tip-off's at 7:30. And this is the first one of the year, so you probably want to be there a little bit early. These watch parties usually were near capacity. So bring a friend, bring a Magic fan. Going to be a great time. Really looking forward to those. And we're going to be having watch parties all season long. This is just going to be the first of many. And it's against the dirty, stinking, freaking Heat. So we've got to come out, got to support the boys, be around other Magic fans, have a great time, and officially kick off the season. Looking forward to that, Kev.
Hey, look, the biggest reason the Six Man Show exists is to grow this fan base, but also grow the community. If you're sitting there listening to this, you're like, man, I live in Central Florida. I watch games by myself at home. And you're like, I don't want to do that. I want to go meet some fellow Orlando Magic fans. That is quite literally why we exist. That's why we do these watch parties. Go check it out on next Wednesday night, the 23rd. Meet some new Magic fans. Make some new friends. Have a good time and cheer on the Magic as we hopefully break in their new video scoreboard in Miami with an Orlando Magic W.
Oh, man. And the fact we're only 9 days away from the season opener means we're only 11 days away from the home opener. So just like looking forward to being just back in Kia, for the first time since the playoffs last year. And man, it's going to be a great time. So I hope to see you guys there. Again, that's going to be at the Social House. Kev, this episode, we thought we would take a look at the Eastern Conference, right? Obviously, we're going to talk about the Magic and how we think the Magic are going to stack up. But we thought we would take this opportunity to get our takes and opinions officially on record in terms of what teams we think are going to finish where, and how the regular season is going to shape up for the Eastern Conference, and then eventually how the playoffs are going to shape up for the Eastern Conference. So we're going to start at 15. We're going to start at the bottom in the basement where
Cooper Flag sweepstakes.
Yeah, where we were for a long time. But no longer. We're no longer worried about, what our lottery odds are going to be and all that kind of stuff. We are really going to be talking about where the Magic should be in the postseason picture. And it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see how our opinions differ here. I'm sure there's going to be some things that we agree on. I know, the optimism of us both will probably shine through in this as well. But Kev, why don't you tell us who you have finishing dead last in the Eastern Conference at 15?
Man, I went back and forth. I think there's going to be two particularly bad teams in the Eastern.
Particularly stinky.
There's going to be a lot of bad teams. Let me just put it this way: a lot of bad teams in the Eastern Conference. But I think one team is going to be slightly worse. And even as I'm saying this out loud, I'm going back and forth. But I think I'm going to. This might surprise some people. I think I'm going to put the Wizards at 15. I went back and forth really hard between them and, spoiler alert, my 14th team, the Nets. But I think those two teams are going to be in a different threshold versus the other bad teams in the East. But I'm going to go with the Wizards at 15.
Yeah, you know what? I have the exact same two teams, but I have the Nets at 15 and I have the Wizards at 14. The only redeemable thing that I can say about the Nets is if Ben Simmons actually is healthy. And even if he is, I don't know that's really going to be enough for them to not be like the bottom dwellers of the Eastern Conference. When I look at the Wizards roster, they just have more pieces that I like. Added Jonas Valanciunas, Rashawn Holmes, who has been up and down. I know Malcolm Brogdon is going to miss some time at the beginning of the season, but Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole. If Jordan Poole can even figure it out a little bit, they're going to be a lot better. Kyra Lewis Jr., who is a guy who's had a disappointing start to his career, but I was really high on him, coming out of the draft. But Sadiq Bey, Corey Kispert, those are two guys that I still really like. Bilal Coulibaly, they have some nice pieces on that team. Keyshawn George out of Miami, Bub Carrington from Pitt, Alex Sarr, right? They have some young, promising talent. When I look at the Brooklyn Nets roster, I'm just like, man, who is going to be leading this team? Is it going to be, Dennis Schroeder, Bojan Bogdanovic, Cam Johnson? I just don't really see it with this Brooklyn Nets roster. And it's going to take pretty much a miracle from Ben Simmons for this team to be anywhere near competitive.
I 100% agree. The only reason why is I'm just not going to count on the Wizards' health. That's it.
Fair.
Some of those guys, not reliable when it comes to health. And I'm also not discounting the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. And it's not just Cooper Flag. This is supposed to be a really good draft overall. And so I just feel like the Wizards are going to take one more year to tank in all kinds of creative ways because of the things that you mentioned. They did have a pretty good draft this past year. They have a lot of good young pieces. And so I think they want to try to add one more. So that's the only reason why, but on paper, you're right. The Nets are the worst roster in the East and maybe in the whole league. But I just think the Wizards are going to find a way. I think they will, but we'll see.
Another team that I feel like is dying to enter the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, and this isn't so much of just like an indictment of their talent, more so than it is like an indictment on just their lack of direction. So this might surprise some folks. But next, at 13, I have the Chicago Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
They lose DeMar DeRozan, this past offseason. They don't really get even like a supplemental replacement where they get a few guys that can make up for the production that they're losing with him. Nikola Vucevic, you won't find a better Vucevic, bigger Vucevic fan than me. He's entering his 13th season, seems to be on a decline. Zach LaVine has not been the same player the last few years. And then you just start going down the roster. They've got some talented, promising pieces. Kobe White, Lonzo Ball is the big question mark for me on this team. A guy that basically had like his whole knee rebuilt. It's going to be interesting to see what he looks like. Added Josh Giddey, still have Ayo Dosunmu. But after that, like you've got like the Torrey Craig, Javon Carter, Talen Horton Tucker, who are fine players in their own right. But not any of those guys do I think are really going to be able to contribute in a significant enough way to put this team in contention for like the play-in. So I've got Chicago at 13.
And you're 100%. Everything you said is exactly accurate, Jonathan. But the reason why I don't have Chicago at 13 is because how you started that sentence. They don't have direction. This is a team that should have been in the lottery for several years, but because of their lack of direction, they just kept trying to make it work. And for some odd reason, we've been given no indication that they're going to change that anytime soon. And so for that reason, I have to wait until I unveil where I put the Bulls. But it's not at 13. I have the Pistons. I have the Detroit Pistons at number 13. A team that obviously has some young talent. But again, when you talk about direction, it's a little bit interesting. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey as the backcourt. Seems promising. How will they work together? Obviously, didn't get a whole lot of taste of that last season with Cade Cunningham's injury. But they add Tobias Harris this offseason. Questionable maybe to make that kind of acquisition. But I'm a big Jalen Duren fan. I think he's got obviously huge upside. So that'll be interesting. But again, I think it's going to be a team that's going to be interested in adding another lottery piece this summer. So I've got them at 13.
Now, who do you have at 12? You go next.
I have the Charlotte Hornets at 12. That's who I have at 12. So I still don't have the Bulls yet, which again, on paper doesn't make sense, but I just don't trust that front office. I think they're going to try to, well, anyway, I'll get to them in a second. I have the Charlotte Hornets. They have some redeeming qualities, right? LaMelo Ball, obviously. Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, I think is a fine player, though not great. They have Trey Mann now, which is interesting. But for me, I just still don't think they're close to. Maybe close isn't the right word. I should have prefaced this as well. This group right here, this I'll say 9, 10, 11, 12 group, I think are all going to be really, really tight. That's why I was talking about earlier. I think that 14, 15 Nets Wizards, I think they're in a totally different category versus this group. And so when I'm talking about these teams, I don't think there's a big gap, like 1 to 2 games between each of these. But anyway, yeah, I've got the Charlotte Hornets at number 12. Who's your 12?
Yeah, to be fair, from 12 to 9, those 4 teams there, I feel like there's going to be an absolute dogfight for those final play-in seeds. 9 and 10 there, and I think last season where we saw a lot of flip-flopping, around 6, 7, 8. I think we're going to just see a lot of flip-flopping at 9 and 10 over the course of the season. So at number 12, I have the Detroit Pistons. I don't have the Charlotte Hornets quite as low as you do. And although I'm not as high on Cade Cunningham as I am a guy, obviously, like Paolo Banchero, I'm still very much a Cade Cunningham believer. I do think Monty Williams was really just there the last couple of years last year in Detroit, just really collecting a paycheck. Even though JB Bickerstaff was not perfect in Cleveland, I think he is sort of what they need. I don't think he's quite in the same level of Jamal Mosley in terms of motivating young players, but I think he's sort of in the same vein. Those guys are good friends, and I'm sure bounce a lot of things off of one another. Adding Tobias Harris, Paul Reed, getting a few more, adults sort of in the room there. Tim Hardaway Jr. as well. But then you have another year of obviously Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, like you mentioned, Jaden Ivey,
Sar Thompson.
Sar Thompson as well. They have Malik Beasley. I feel like they have enough pieces there. And if JB Bickerstaff can sort of get guys into the right positions, it felt like Monty Williams was awful, in terms of just managing this roster and putting guys in positions to be successful. I think if JB Bickerstaff can do a little bit better of a job, they have Ron Holland as well, the rookie, who I feel like is going to, has a lot of potential. So I think if he can just sort of push the right buttons, pull the right levers, the Detroit Pistons could get better a lot quicker than maybe some folks are anticipating, just because like Monty Williams did such a bad job coaching that team and managing that roster the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely within reason. Let's see, what number was that? That was your 12?
That was 12. So at 11, I have the Toronto Raptors. People are talking about, maybe Scotty Barnes is going to take another leap. Even if Scotty Barnes is able to take another leap, I don't know that it's going to be enough of a leap. Like Jakob Poeltl was talking at their media day about how like it doesn't make sense for them to play every game like it's the end of the world, because they know they're really just going to be focusing mostly on development of this year. Sure, they have guys like RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Bruce Brown have been part of good teams in the past, but I just don't really see this team being able to put it together. Grady Dick sort of had an up and down rookie year last year. Like Scotty Barnes would really have to take a pretty significant leap for me to really put Toronto in consideration for like the 8th or 7th seed.
The Six Man Show is brought to you by Jam Hot Chicken. Jam Hot Chicken is proudly serving the city beautiful, and they're bringing jams, culture, and hot chicken to the heart of Winter Park. You can find them at 400 West New England Avenue, Suite 13 in Hannibal Square there in beautiful Winter Park. They serve amazing LA and Nashville inspired hot chicken, whether it's the Sando, which is their sandwich, or the box, which is Jonathan and I's favorite, or anything else. They've got all kinds of yummy, tasty food. Whether you like it really spicy, you can get that, or no spice at all, you can ask for that too. All of it is super good. Follow them at Jam Hot Chicken on all social media, and definitely check out jamhotchickenfl.com to access the menu, online ordering, and all things Jam Hot. And they are now available on Uber Eats locally there in the Winter Park area. So if you're craving some Jam Hot Chicken but don't want to leave the comfort of your couch, check them out on Uber Eats and you can have it delivered right to your home. So yeah, check them out. Again, Jam Hot Chicken on all social media. And when you visit Jam Hot Chicken, just let them know that the Six Man Show sent you.
This episode is also brought to you by Nikki Nunu, Goaty93, Caleb Pete, Random Hustle, and Half Freakin'. These are some of our Hall of Fame and elite tier patrons over there at patreon.com/the Six Man Show, where for as little as $2 a month, you can help financially support the show and help us do everything that we do. Everything that we use, the equipment, the software that we use to record, hosting watch parties, giveaways, everything that we do all season long, we can't do without our patrons. You all help make each and every episode possible. If you would like to join in our mission, which is to literally help grow the Orlando Magic fan base and fill Kia Center each and every night our beloved Orlando Magic play, again, you can find us over at patreon.com/the Six Man Show. Back to the episode.
For my 11 is where I do have the Chicago Bulls. Again, on paper, it makes no sense, but nothing about that franchise has made sense over the last 3 years. Okay. And so I just think they're just going to go for it again. It's the worst spot to be in all of basketball, the 11 seed, right? You're going to just miss out on the play-in, and you're, 5 spots behind the worst record in the conference. So we talked about the Bulls at length already. So I've got them at 11, and 10 is where I have the Toronto Raptors that you just mentioned. So I have the Toronto Raptors just sneaking in to that play-in where I think they'll get destroyed in their one play-in game, which we'll talk about who I have them playing in a second. But yeah, that's where I have the Raptors. I don't think they're a good team, obviously. Again, this whole bottom section of the East is so bad. But I think they have enough pieces to make it in the regular season, right? Again, I don't think they'll make any noise. If they were to be the 10 seed, I think they'll lose that first game. But I think they have enough to make some be a relatively good defensive team this season. I think offensively they're going to really struggle. But obviously us Magic fans know what that's like. But being a good defensive team can win you some games in this league. And so that's why I've got them at 10. Here's the interesting thing. Like we talked about, again, this whole like 10 through 13. We could be talking about, this is crazy. We could be talking about a team, Jonathan, that makes the play-in with 30 wins. Like, I think that's legit possible. Like,
I don't know about that, man.
Take any of these. I have the Vegas numbers. Take any of these teams, Toronto, Chicago, Charlotte, and Detroit. They're all projected to win between 25 and 30. The highest one there is Charlotte at 30 and a half wins. I think it is absolutely possible we have a team in the play-in that wins 30 or 31, maybe 32 games. I think it's possible, which is crazy to have a 50-loss team in the NBA postseason.
I mean, the first several years that we've had of the play-in, it feels like, especially in the Eastern Conference, like you've had to have been around 40 wins, to be able to make the play-in. I just feel like one of these teams that we feel like are going to be so awful are going to be better than we expect, and that happens every single year. And that not so bad team will cannibalize like the other actually bad teams.
Sure.
And at least get to, 36, 37, 38 wins maybe. But maybe you're right. Maybe we see like the first 30 win team in the play-in this season, which would be pretty crazy. At 10, I have the Atlanta Hawks, right? Like a team that traded away DeJounte Murray this past offseason. They've moved on from John Collins as well. Trae Young obviously is Trae Young. He's going to be great. He's going to do all the things that he does. For me, the big question mark on this team is going to be how big of a leap can Jalen Johnson take in his third year. And I feel like moving on from DeJounte Murray and getting the return that they did was them acknowledging that they fully believe in Jalen Johnson, that he's capable of being the second best player on this team behind Trae Young. And I do think that's legitimate. I think Jalen Johnson is one of the best up-and-coming two-way players in the league, and I expect him to take another leap this year. But outside of that, I just don't really love their roster. You've got Cody Zeller, Clint Capella, Larry Nance Jr. Don't really love any of those bigs that are going to be in the rotation. Bogdan Bogdanovic, which is a guy that every time I look at his stats, I forget that he's even a year older than I am. So this is a guy who's now in his 32-year-old season. DeAndre Hunter is a guy who's had a lot of potential and people have been really high on in the past, but it just doesn't look like he's going to match that potential. Garrison Matthews, Onyeka Okongwu, a guy who I've been really high on in the past as well. I just don't really see it panning out for him. And I just don't really love their roster. Zachary Reese-Hache, their rookie, they picked first in the draft. It seems like they're going to be focusing on development this year as well. And they're a team that also is like, are you going to lean into Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, or are you going to be focusing on, developing your number one overall pick in the draft? So I still feel like because of Trae Young and because of Jalen Johnson, I believe in those guys a lot more than I believe in some of those other rosters that we've talked about. And it just feels like, Trae Young is just going to have to do everything this year for this team offensively. And that's really when the Hawks and Trae Young have been the best in the past. Trying to share the playmaking and scoring responsibilities with DeJounte Murray didn't really work, and it seems like they're acknowledging that and moving on from him. So I think the Atlanta Hawks find a way to sneak in there into the play-in.
Yeah, but you're right. Trae Young goes down. That team is a cellar dweller.
Correct.
Yeah, that team is down there with, maybe your Detroits or whoever down there that far. So that's your 10, right? Is that what you said?
That is correct.
So who's your 9? Is it? If you said Charlotte yet? Are we in Charlotte?
I
territory?
have the Charlotte Hornets there, number 9. When you look at and listen, I am a strong believer that God will not let the Charlotte Hornets prosper as long as they employ Miles Bridges, who I think is a despicable human being.
Yep.
But when you look up and down their roster, obviously you look at a guy like LaMelo Ball, who health is obviously a big question mark there. But Brandon Miller, I feel like those guys, another year, that is a truly dynamic backcourt. If Miles Bridges, although I don't want him to be good, but if he can regain his form from a couple of seasons ago before he started to have the real legal trouble, that's going to be a big boost for this Charlotte Hornets team. And they've got some really solid role players, in terms of Nick Richards and Mark Williams, Josh Green, Grant Williams, Seth Curry. This is a team full of guys who, if they buy into, Charles Lee in his first year there, and there's been, rave, reviews so far about Charles Lee and what he's doing with this roster in Charlotte, it just feels like they're sort of due for a bounce back year because, 3 years ago, looked like they were going to be, they were one of the better up and coming young teams in the NBA, especially in the Eastern Conference. And then it really started with LaMelo Ball's, injury troubles and Miles Bridges' legal troubles the last couple of years. So if those guys can figure it out, I just don't see why the Hornets can't, find themselves in the play-in.
And I think the Charles Lee part is definitely big for them. For those not familiar, he was assistant coach under Budenholzer for years and years and years, first in Atlanta and then followed him to Milwaukee. And then last season was assistant with the Boston Celtics, NBA champion. So definitely think that could be a huge addition to them. Obviously, most of us have some still appreciation for Steve Clifford, but it'll be a different voice, a different way of motivating there for sure than what Steve Clifford used to bring. So yeah, I think that's totally possible, and I'd love that. I'd love to see them sneak into the play-in.
I would not love to see them there.
I know.
But
the thing is, outside of Miles Bridges, there are a lot of guys on that team that I actually do like and root for. And so I think it would be cool. So that is your 9 seed. The Hornets all the way at 9. I like it. It's bold. It's something different. 9 for me is where I have Atlanta. So I do have Atlanta all the way up there at 9. Again, it's totally riding on the health of Trae Young. If he goes down for even 20 games, I think they're cooked. And so, which is very possible. It's happened before. So
we've got the same bottom 7 though.
Yeah, but I think most people would have the same bottom.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think the bottom section of this East is going to be so bad. And hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully some of these teams surprise us and make the bottom section of the East more interesting and more exciting. But yeah, that's who I have at 9 is the Atlanta Hawks. So we go into 8 now. We go into 8. This is where I have the Dirty Stinking Heat. That's who I have.
Sir, they suck.
Yeah, I hope they do, and I hope they're even lower. I hope they miss out on all of this. But yes, that is where I do have the Miami Heat. Unfortunately, you have to count Eric Spoelstra as
correct.
As unfortunately, I don't want to say automatic certain amount of wins, but for whatever reason, he is just capable of taking whatever mess he's given and turning it into wins, like into a playoff team. And this season, obviously, they still have the two-headed monster of Bam and Jimmy Butler. Still have Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic. Of course, Jaime Jaquez Jr., who bothers me. But Terry Rozier is there. Duncan Robinson. Kevin Love is still alive and still playing basketball, so that'll be interesting. So, but the biggest, I don't know if it's the biggest addition. It probably is the biggest addition. Khalil Ware for them, who they drafted, getting rave reviews over the course of preseason so far. Be very interesting.
Every Heat rookie gets rave reviews. Like Jaquez was really good last year. Obviously, Tyler Hero was solid. His first couple of years and still is solid. But it's just like every young guy that the Heat get their hands on. Like before that, it was Haywood Highsmith, and it's this Heat culture like crap that people continue to buy into. And it's like, yeah, congratulations on, the play-in yet again.
Yeah. So that's where I hope they finish 15th, but I'm hoping, for the sake of this conversation that they end up 8 and not, not in the playoffs. I want to see them in the play-in again, and hopefully they don't even make it past that. So I've got Miami at 8.
Yeah, I've got Miami at 8 as well. And for me, like, it comes down to Jimmy Butler, is here in his 13th year season, and has not played more than 65 games since the 2016-2017 season, which was his last year in Chicago, right? Like the last several years, 60, 64, 57, 52, 58, 55, 65. Like I just, until Jimmy Butler, and he's going to be 35 years old, like until he is able to play 70 plus games, stay healthy, like their offense, like Jimmy Butler is their late game offense. Like regardless of what happens, through the course of the rest of the game, when it comes down to the last 5 minutes, their offense becomes go to Jimmy Butler. Now, losing Caleb Martin, not really having a replacement for that, like their last several years, like 3 out of their top 6 or 7 rotation guys in Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, and Caleb Martin, from that, finals run a couple of years ago, all those guys are gone. And I just don't really feel like they've done a good job of replacing those guys. So I don't like the Heat. They suck, because not even just talking about basketball, just in general, just their very essence is that of suck to me.
That's right.
And Florida is Orlando's again. So they can suck it. And yeah, I have them as the 8th seed.
All right. Who's your 7 then?
7th seed, I have as the Indiana Pacers, right? A team that a lot of people are super high on, because of the fact that they made the Eastern Conference Finals run last year. But my opinion, that more so had to do with, their injury luck and the other team's injury bad luck. I'm just not that high on the Indiana Pacers. I know this is going to be a hot take. I don't see Tyrese Halliburton as like this superstar level MVP caliber player that some people see. He just chokes too often in big games and is just super inconsistent. Like, you can't put up, 25 and 13 and then like 9 points and 5 assists the next night. You just can't do that on I wouldn't say it's a consistent basis, but it happens far too often with Tyrese Halliburton for me to believe in him as like this number one option kind of guy that can lead a franchise. I don't think Pascal Siakam is that either. I think we saw that in Toronto after Kawhi left. I think Toronto was willing to move on from Pascal and did not want to pay him because of that aspect. Now, they do have guys that I really like, younger guys like Andrew Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin, but I just don't feel like there is enough on that roster. And sure, maybe there's a factor of like Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam being a little bit better in year 2. But I just don't see them as being better than any of the other teams that we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I had a hard time with the Pacers. I also have them at 7, by the way.
This is going to get fun.
It's going to get very interesting in a second. I'll just say I had a hard time with them because of all those things you mentioned. On paper, they only had Pascal Siakam for, I just looked it up. They went 23 and 18 when they had him in the regular season before, the postseason. But then the other issue was they didn't have Benedict Mathurin down the stretch. He was out injured. And so having him there on the second unit, how much does that improve them? But again, the inconsistency of Tyrese Halliburton is ultimately why I put them at 7. So, I also have the Indiana Pacers at 7. So should we go to 6?
Please.
I have the Orlando Magic.
Wow. Okay.
At 6. Yeah. This one was tough. Because in a lot of ways, obviously, I think the Magic should take a step. But I have there's a lot of other good teams at the top of the East that I can also see taking steps. Just like we talked about, basically for me, seeds 9 through 13 are going to be really tight. I just feel like maybe 7-2, at least 7-3 are going to be really, really tight, I think. So when I say the Magic are 6, I could see them being 1 to 3 games out of the 3 seed. Like, that's how tight it is. Similar to last season, right? I think it's going to be super tight. So I have the Magic at 6. Do I need to go over the Orlando Magic roster for our viewers, or do we think we're good on that? Okay, good.
I think we're probably good.
Okay, good. Yeah. So that's where I have the Orlando Magic at 6, but it's super tough, and I think it could go pretty much any way in that like 3 to 7 range.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, as we're talking about, the 9th and 10th seeds in the Eastern Conference being an absolute dogfight, I think the 3 through the 7 seeds are really going to be the same thing. Like, I think there's the potential, you're going into the last 2 weeks of the season and you're the 7th seed. You still have a realistic chance at, the 3 seed, probably not the 2 seed. That's really going to be dependent on health, and we'll continue to talk about that. But I'm right there with you. But I have the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Now, there's been some talk in the preseason. Evan Mobley, has really only appeared in 1 game so far, but looked really good, 19.6 rebounds. If Evan Mobley takes like an offensive leap, then throw what I'm about to say out of the window, because I think that'll put them a step above a few of the teams that we're talking about. But just from like a roster standpoint, didn't really improve this offseason. I don't know the Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, like Mobley looked really good in the series against the Magic. Once Jarrett Allen went out, looked really good against the Celtics as well. So I'm not really sold on that fit. I'm still not totally convinced about the fit with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell in the backcourt as well. Now, the one counter to this is going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson. I do feel like that is perhaps an opportunity for, just improvement there on its own. But, it's been a little while since Kenny Atkinson was the head coach of a young team, and we saw this a few years ago with the Brooklyn Nets. We saw him do it once. This is going to be like sort of prove it. Like, prove to me, Kenny Atkinson, that you're going to be able to do that again. So at 6th, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yep, I think that's totally fair. Which means at number 5, you have
the Milwaukee Bucks.
Oh,
the Milwaukee Bucks. This is me putting my money where my mouth is. I've talked all offseason about how the Magic have a realistic chance to have home court advantage and be as high as the 4th seed, in the East, maybe a little bit higher than that. This is part me banking on the Magic continuing to take another step forward, adding a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Anthony Black, I think, is going to be just better suited for that second unit than Markelle Fultz was. If we get some more Jonathan Isaac minutes as well. And this year, when guys go down, knowing that we have Goga Batadze, Tristan da Silva, Jet Howard, those guys waiting in the wings, I just feel better about this year's Magic team overall. And when it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks, Brook Lopez, who born in the 80s, by the way. I don't want to make anybody sound too old, but Brook Lopez is a guy who is aging. Chris Middleton as well. Last year, thinking about, why weren't the Bucks really as good as they should have been? I know part of it had to do with health, but it was really Chris Middleton playing 75 or playing 55 games. Giannis and Dame both played 73 games this year, or 73 games last year. So those guys would really have to take a step forward in terms of their cohesion as a unit. Chris Middleton is a guy who's going to prove that he's able to stay healthy the last several years. He hasn't really done that. And Brook Lopez, who's really the anchor of their defense, he's another year older, and they're not really a team that has a lot of depth. So I'm just not sold on this version of the Milwaukee Bucks, leaning into Dame and leaning into Chris Middleton. It's rare that guards, like Damian Lillard, who rely on a lot of athleticism and shiftiness. Sure, he's always going to have that long range. Well, he didn't really have a ton of the long range shot making last year. That was a big problem for the Milwaukee Bucks. But it's once these top tier guards sort of take a step down, you don't normally see them sort of get back to that level. We saw it with James Harden, and we heard for how long that James Harden is coming into this season in the best shape of his life. He's going to be back to James Harden, and James Harden never really got back to James Harden. And I think we could be seeing that with Dame. And again, depth was a big problem for them last year. I think it's going to be a problem again for them this year. But this, for me, has more to do with hey, I've been talking about how the Magic are going to be better all offseason long, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. So who do you have at 5?
At 5, I have Milwaukee right there. I think when it comes to Milwaukee, I think I do like some of the pieces they added. They added Gary Trent Jr., who I think will be helpful. Taurean Prince, a guy who's won before, DeLon Wright. Not huge names, but I think the Gary Trent Jr. acquisition in particular strengthens that starting lineup. But you're right, the depth past that is pretty rough. Where I am with Milwaukee is I think they could also be a team that somewhat coasts through the regular season, really just eyeing the postseason. Obviously, Doc Rivers didn't have the best first year last year with them in Milwaukee. So I've got them at number 5. Number 4 is where I have Cleveland. You talked about them a little bit earlier. I'm banking on Kenny Atkinson, really. Like you said, that's about it. You can bank on, a little bit of just development from the guys, but outside of that, they didn't add anybody. It's not like they made any roster splashes, but to me, the big one is Kenny Atkinson. I think JB Bickerstaff just really did a poor job last season, and we saw it especially in the playoffs. I think he really kind of got out-coached in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, he had Donovan Mitchell, and we didn't, and so that kind of made a big difference there in that 7-game series. But anyway, I have those Cleveland Cavaliers at 4. So at number 4 must be where you have
I'll
your
tell you who
Orlando
I don't
Magic.
have at number 4. No, I have the Magic at number 4.
Yeah.
I just feel like the Magic, again, I've talked about this for the last several minutes, but the things that they've been able to, add, to this roster, really sort of like addition by subtraction. I think the second unit has the potential to be better defensively with Anthony Black there versus Markelle Fultz. Not that Markelle Fultz was bad, but I do feel that at this point, Anthony Black's going to be better in that role. The fact that he actually is going to be willing to shoot from behind the arc. Gary Harris, in that second unit, that second unit is going to be really good defensively. We're basically swapping out Markelle Fultz and Joe Ingles for Anthony Black and Gary Harris. Like that second unit is going to be a lot better defensively. And as good as that bench was last year, now Markelle Fultz and Joe Ingles were a big part of the offense in that second unit. If this second unit can figure it out offensively, and I think Anthony Black and the aggression and the handle and the finishing around the rim that we've seen so far in the preseason, if that can carry over into the regular season, and we see maybe a bounce back year for Cole Anthony, who had a lot of off the court struggles last year, if that second unit can be solid offensively, I think once again we're going to have one of the best bench units in the league, and we have a pretty solid freaking starting unit in Jalen Suggs, KCP, Franz, Paolo, and Wendell Carter Jr. So this is just me like really believing in the Orlando Magic, and we talked about, hey, this is a team who should be able to compete for home court advantage, and they've been talking about it all offseason, and they talked about it at Media Day. The Magic should be going for home court advantage this year.
You've talked me into it. 1 seed Orlando. No, just kidding. No, I mean you make great points. Like it's hard, but again, I'm guarding my heart, Jonathan, is what I'm doing in this exercise.
And you need to be doing that more than
that is right true. Now. I need to be doing that. Yeah. So I had the Cavs at 4 there. Who is your 3 seed then? This is going to be interesting, by the way. Like obviously, if you do the math at home, it's down to 3 teams: Boston, New York, and Philly. And so I'm curious what order you have those. Who's your 3?
I've got Philly there. I just feel like Boston. I mean, we don't have to. Who do you have at 3? And then I feel like this is a conversation in itself.
I also have Philly at 3.
Okay.
I like some of the pieces they added, by the way, this summer, which they didn't have a whole lot of wiggle room. They had to grab some guys on the cheap, and they did. Well, obviously, the Paul George thing aside, I should mention that. I'm talking about some of the other guys around them, made their depth a little bit more manageable. But yeah, so I've got Philly at 3. Some people have Philly really low just because they don't count on Joel Embiid, and you shouldn't count on Joel Embiid for more than 60 games, 65 maybe. So I get that, but I still think Tyrese Maxey can win games by himself. That guy is an animal. People keep discounting him too much for my liking because he lives in the shadow of Joel Embiid. And now you add Paul George to that. I think this team is definitely going to win 50-plus games, even if Joel Embiid is out for 30.
I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think Paul George is a third fiddle there behind Tyrese Maxey.
I agree.
Tyrese Maxey has taken such big steps, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah.
He's incredible. But the rest of the 76ers, like guard rotation, is what scares me. All those dudes are just super old.
Yeah.
And if Joel Embiid goes down and, like a guy, maybe like a Kyle Lowry goes down, like they could really be, in big trouble. And really there's just going to be a lot on Tyrese Maxey and Paul George's shoulders in the event that a few of these guys go down. They are one of the older teams in the NBA now. But like, I still expect them to be really good. Like you said, win 50-plus games. If they have 2 out of those 3 guys on most nights, they're going to be one of the better teams in the East.
Yeah, and you talk about depth. There are some concerns, but for me, the good news for them is if Tyrese Maxey goes down, Kyle Lowry goes down, and Reggie Jackson goes down, then Orlando Magic preseason legend Jeff Doughton Jr. is there to fill in the point guard spot, so they'll be fine. Right. But yeah, I agree. They've got a really legitimate 3-headed monster there, and I think you're right. They'll have 2 out of 3 almost every night. So I think they're going to definitely win 50-plus games, and I've got them at the 3 seed.
So number 2, I think we both have the New York Knicks. You have the New York Knicks at number 1.
I have the New York Knicks at number 1.
Holy smokes. The biggest question mark for me with the New York Knicks is now that Mitchell Robinson, it seems like, isn't going to play for the rest of this calendar year. They're hoping he's going to be ready to go in January. Karl Anthony Towns is not like a legit center, right? Like he's sort of like this hybrid, but to me he's more of a 4 than he is a 5, and he's not necessarily like a rim presence and a rim protector, in the classic sense of it. So I do feel like their big man rotation outside of Karl Anthony Towns is really going to be in question. I think they're going to stand to potentially really struggle there, but you still have Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. Like this team is going to be really freaking good, but I can't put them over the defending champs.
Here's why I can. 2 reasons. 1, because I want to be a little spicy. 2, 3 reasons then. 2, that they won, what did they win? 50 games last year? They won 50 games last year. And a lot of the season, Tom Thibodeau was just juggling whatever random bodies that he had available to him, right? For me, it's like the whole Tom Thibodeau mentality of like, they are going to try to win every game no matter what. Doesn't matter who's available. Doesn't matter second night of a back-to-back. Doesn't matter all those things. Now, part of it was a really magical run for them last season. I get that. But you make the additions you have. And again, depth is a big issue for this team. Like the moves that they made over the last 9 months between the OG trade, the Cat trade, all that kind of stuff, their depth is really questionable. But I just feel like the system that Tom Thibodeau has, plus that starting five, is pretty darn nasty. Even if you want to talk about Cat not being a center, that's fine. And I agree, I think, as a concern. But when it comes to the regular season, I just feel like they just go 100% every night. And that's why I think they're going to eke out the number one seed in the East. On the Boston side, for me, I think there's just a bit of a relaxed energy for the regular season only for the Celtics. They've done the title thing. They know, and they just experienced the gauntlet, that grueling, which they've done before, but to actually win it. And I think they're going to just take it a little easier this year, to the tune of maybe they missed that number one seed by 1, 2, 3 games, right? Like, I'm not sitting here saying I think the Knicks are going to run away with the one seed. Absolutely not. But I just think the Celtics are just going to be like, you know what? Let's just make sure we have home court. Let's get there. And I can see them taking some nights pretty chill. And I think that's okay. I think that team is built for the playoffs. Again, if you ask me who's going to win the Eastern Conference in, the Eastern Conference Finals, I would pick Boston for sure. But I think regular season, Tom Thibodeau loves it. And so that's why I've got the New York Knicks just eking out the one seed there.
Yeah, so I kind of think the opposite. I've seen a lot of people sort of like discrediting, Boston this offseason, like especially Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Like, even though those guys won the ultimate prize and got it done, people like still don't really see them as like some of the best players in the league. Mm-hmm. So I think there's maybe a little bit of that, like, well, we won a title and they still don't believe in us. So like, what do we have to do? We have to run it back. So I don't know that we're going to, see that, lax, sort of, nonchalant regular season. One thing that I do want to say is that Tom Thibodeau, in each of his stops, prior, in terms of head coaching in Minnesota and Chicago, at some point he has sort of like worn out his welcome and the style that he coaches and as hard as he plays some of these guys. But I do think that this New York Knicks team and the mental makeup that team has could be the exception, where some of those teams that we're talking about in the past, I mean, we are talking about guys, like Jimmy Butler, like Joakim Noah, Derrick Rose. So it's not that he's necessarily had like mentally weak teams, but I do think like the Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, a lot of those guys, I feel like maybe they're better equipped to deal with that than some of the past Thibodeau teams. So it's going to be interesting. I will say, like, to me, it's not a 1A, 1B. I still think Boston is clear cut like 1 and New York is 2, and then it's sort of everybody else. But I don't think we see this massive gap like the last month of the season that Boston is basically all but shirt up the number one seed. Right. This season, I could see that coming down to the last 2 weeks or so of the season. Like
last year, Boston had a 14-game lead at the end of the season.
I don't see that
64 wins versus 50. I don't think that happens either. I don't think there's a 14-win gap anywhere in the East this year, honestly. Like, I think, like you said, you have your 1A, your 1B, and then we have that 3 through 7, and then we have that whole 8, 9, 10, and then we have I think all those, it's going to be pretty tight East. Again, the bottom's going to be really bad, but the top's going to be really good. Like, people talk about the Western Conference, and they should, right? OKC and Denver is always going to be a threat. Minnesota, obviously, really good last year. Dallas is always going to be dangerous. Phoenix underachieved last year. Who knows what they'll do this year? But again, I think the top section of the East goes neck and neck with some of those top teams in the West. So should be a very interesting year. I think it's going to be really, really fun Eastern Conference year. And I'm just so glad that the Magic are part of the conversation at the top of the conference now instead of the bottom. So that's, hey, if we can just finish in that top area, let's avoid the play-in, go to the playoffs, and make some noise. I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, and the Celtics, they're still going to be without Kristaps Porzingis for a little bit. So how do they adapt to that?
Al Horford's old, by the way, 38 now,
very old,
which is wild.
Right up there with Brook Lopez, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I do think that both of those teams, I do think the Knicks are a little bit more susceptible. I like Boston's depth a bit more,
for sure.
The fact that they were able to get Lonnie Walker, basically for nothing is still pretty crazy to me. Like I'm not super high on Lonnie Walker, but I've always liked him. So I'm interested to see how he can fit into that team and if he can become a guy that, some nights just gives you like 20 off the bench or something. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibilities, but I do think the Knicks are a little bit more susceptible to like one big injury to that team could, derail them differently than it did last year.
100% agree.
They don't have an Isaiah Hartenstein sort of waiting in the wings if a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, goes down or, Mikal Bridges. I mean, it's not going to be Mikal Bridges. Knock on wood. I don't want it to be that dude's been super healthy for most of his career, but like an OG Anunoby, like there isn't that just starter level elite role player coming in off the bench to keep things afloat in the way that we saw, from guys last year, like a Dante DiVincenzo who is gone now in the Cat trade, and then Isaiah Hartenstein who moved on to OKC. I feel like the Knicks are a big injury away from like 2 through 7 being an absolute dogfight.
Mm-hmm.
So keep an eye on that. Kev, one more preseason game, coming up. I mean, 4 days from now, as you're listening to this, we're basically going to go, 10 days in between Magic preseason games. So I feel like there's a potential for, Friday's matchup, at home to be a little bit weird. I would hope that we're going to see basically like a regular season dress rehearsal for the Magic. But again, because it's basically going to be like 10 days in between those games, I don't really know what to expect. And we're talking about this Friday at 7 o'clock when the Magic close their preseason schedule against the Philadelphia 76ers. That game will be on Valley Sports Florida, by the way. And no Joel Embiid. He's already been ruled out. No Wendell Carter, it seems. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jamal Mosley approaches that final preseason game.
Yeah, it was very interesting, especially because of Wednesday's game against San Antonio, where he played all the guys fighting for roster spots, fighting for G League spots in that fourth quarter. It made me think like, okay, because we knew Friday's game was canceled before that, he had to find a time to showcase those guys and give them a chance, and so he did that. And so I'm curious. Part of me wonders if he's still got to give them some playing time in that game Friday. I think we will see some of those guys on Friday, but I'm hopeful that we'll see the actual roster guys more so. Like not just the first, second team. I think the third stringers could be out there in the fourth quarter trying to win the game, which I think will be a lot of fun. Like seeing Jet Howard out there with Tristan da Silva, and the thing with Philly, like you said, Joel Embiid out. Are they going to play Tyrese Maxey, Paul George in that final game? Who knows? But anyway, it'll be interesting. I'm just glad it'll be a home game. Magic fans haven't seen this team since May, basically. And so to finally have a home game on Friday for Magic fans, that'll be fun. But yeah, I really have no idea what to expect. It's so weird, so unprecedented. It never seen anything like it. So I'm definitely interested to see what Jamal Mosley rolls out there.
Other than like the general question of what is the rotation going to look like on Friday, what are your biggest questions still remaining in preseason? Yeah,
the biggest questions, some of my biggest questions have already been answered when it comes to the second unit, wings. We've talked about that a lot, obviously, but the question mark now with Jet Howard starting last week on Wednesday, what happens on Friday? Jamal Mosley does not slot Jet Howard in for Gary Harris on that second unit, does he? I don't think so. I think that second unit stays intact, but it's something worth watching because that would be very interesting, I think. And then obviously my other question is I want to see Franz hit a 3. He's 0 for 4, in the first 2 games of the preseason. It's not funny, John. This is serious.
No, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm not going to lose sleep Friday night if Franz doesn't hit a 3.
If he goes 0 for, I might because he's gone 0 for 2 and 0 for 2. I need to see him hit a 3 before the season starts, or I'm not sleeping from Friday night till Wednesday.
I want to see more volume. If he's 0 for 2, I'm not worried. If he's 0 for 5, that won't feel great. But we're going to see him, take between 3 to 5 threes a game minimum in the regular season. So 0 of 2 in a single game is just too much of a sample size. Too little of a sample size, I would say.
Not for me. If you're an NBA player and you're left wide open on a kick out, you should hit one of those. again, if it's one thing if he's made one in the first 2 games, but the fact that he's 0 for, he's got to hit one on Friday. I got to see.
What if he's just like downplaying everything? Like this has been the whole last year has been like, I'm going to make people think that I can't shoot threes. And then they're going to start letting me open and leaving me open. I'm just going to start raining down, right?
I'm the guy that lives in these fantasy world, not you. You're not allowed to do that.
My biggest question is Jett Howard. Now, what I will say is they have thought about this since the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope deciding to move on from Markelle Fultz. Jamal Mosley and his staff has had an idea of what this 10-man rotation is going to look like going into the regular season. They've spent most of training camp implementing that. They implemented that in their first game. Second game, they thought they were going to be able to come back to Orlando and have another game on Friday, so they decided to sit a lot of the vets, which is why we saw Jett Howard get implemented in the lineup. To me, it would be crazy to see them abandon the past 3 months of thought process behind their rotation based off of one preseason game from Jett Howard. What I will say is I am going to be laser focused on the first starting 5 graphic that we get, or first starting 5 report that we get from Mosley when KCP, Jalen, Franz, Paolo, one of those guys misses a game. I need to see Jett Howard inserted into the starting lineup. And people were like, whoa, well, what if he's in the second unit? That's just not really how Jamal Mosley has handled injuries in his first few years here. He tries to disrupt as few lineups as possible. So he's not going to bring someone from the bench and start them. Starting unit's already been disrupted. Now the second unit is going to be disrupted by moving that person out and moving Jett Howard in. So I just think it's too early. As good as Jett Howard, if it was me, if I'm playing 2K and Jett Howard does that, I'm just putting Jett Howard into the lineup. But we're not playing 2K. This is real life. These are real humans. These are real guys that have been competing for minutes all training camp. To me, it's way too early to just say Jett looked great in the preseason. Now we're going to put him in. Now, if Jett Howard is all of a sudden in the lineup for Gary Harris, you're not going to see me bat an eye. I'll be very excited about that. But I just don't think we see it. I think it's too early.
Yeah, I agree. And you can say a lot about Jett Howard's 3-point shooting. Obviously, we saw that on Wednesday. But you can also say a lot about Gary Harris's defense. Like that is, you talked about it when you talked about the Magic earlier in our standings. Like Gary Harris' defense is legit. And before last season, Gary Harris was a very good 3-point shooter. And so as much as I love Jett Howard, and I think obviously someday he's going to take that role, I'm more banking on Gary Harris' defense, but also that last year his 3-point shooting was an
still
anomaly.
Shot 37%. Like,
right.
It's
That's
still
the thing.
Pretty freaking good.
It got better as the season went on because there were definitely stretches early on that were not
I
great,
think
so.
the 43% that he shot, the year before is more of the anomaly. Like for his career, he's a 37% 3-point shooter.
Right.
So 43% again would be incredible. It's going to obviously be on less volume this year, but 37%, is still a lot better than what we've had, quite a few years here in Orlando.
Right.
All right. I think that is going to do it for this one. Let's wrap this one up. Do you have anything else?
No, it is not.
Oh, the week ahead. We're going 1-0.
We are absolutely going 1-0.
It's the preseason. I keep forgetting about the weekend.
We are beating Philadelphia on Friday.
Yeah.
We just have to. We can't go over in the preseason. It's at home. I think Magic fans are going to be weirdly fired up for a preseason game. I just think this fan base is ready for this season. And so, we're winning on Friday for sure.
Now are we done?
I think so.
Okay. We're going to do, we're just going to wrap this one up here. We're going to finish it. I keep calling you producer Kevin, man.
It's okay. It's fine.
I did this with Amway and Kia. It took me months. So
you did.
But I've gotten, I'm almost, perfect with that now. So
right.
I will get there. Anyways, for Kevin Tucker, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to the 6-Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the 6th Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at 6th Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!
Red!